Live from the chicken wing capital of the world, Buffalo, New York. You're listening to the Childcare Bridge podcast, your source for the best tips, tools, and tactics on how to market and grow your childcare center, ensuring total domination. Total domination. This is the Childcare Bridge, and this is your host, Michael Tasner.
Hey there, and welcome to this week's edition of the Childcare Bridge. Today is the first of a series of content around all things annual and strategic planning. So we're at that time of the year where a lot of multi-center childcare center owners, they start annual planning. They start looking at things like how many locations do they want to have, what do they want the enrollments to look like, finances, and a whole slew of other topics. What I want to do is walk you through over the next couple of weeks how to methodically execute annual planning. And what you're going to find is that most childcare center owners do this wrong. They rush the process, they have the wrong people around the table, they don't have any people around the table, so they do it themselves. I'm going to give you all the ins and outs of how to do this effectively. But what I want you to do today, and what we're going to talk about today, is some of the things that you have to do before you walk into an annual planning session. So what I like to do is to really get a non-biased view of what worked this year and what didn't work. Now, I've talked in the past about doing what I call a 360 marketing audit, and that's where you're methodically going through your website, your social media presence, your content marketing strategy, your paid ads, signage, business cards, everything that relates to marketing. I mean, there's well over 100 things that correlate back to marketing that you're most likely doing, as simple as things like how you answer the phone. Now, that's a good undertaking to go down. But in this case, what I want to do is kind of talk you through how we do a little bit of a wider and more of a full-scale audit to really size up what worked, what didn't this year. And what we're going to do is we're going to start to take that data, that information, to have a couple of meetings and a couple of sessions that happen before you go into formalize annual planning. So here's what you're going to do. On one sheet of paper, you're going to list out every topic that correlates back to center operations. And operations needs to be at the top and cast a really wide net. So under that, there's going to be marketing and accounting, finance, leadership, HR. Like basically you're going to list all the functional areas that go into the day-to-day operations of a center. How are you driving enrollments? How are you finding staff, retaining your staff, paying the team, company culture? How do you keep your families happy? How do you train your teachers, curriculum, like everything that has anything to do with your centers. Literally everything. Now, I've got a checklist. I will put this and link it in the description for you that will then start to kind of spark some other things, because one of the things that I found is that when I say list out all the different things, you might write down like 5 or 10 things, but in reality, similar to marketing, I mean, there's probably going to be between 75 and 150 different things. Now, don't get overwhelmed by the sheer volume, because what we're going to do is we're going to start to categorize it, and then we're going to kind of methodically go through this. So, simple example, if I list out accounting and finance, you're going to list out all the different activities and projects that occurred this year when it came to the accounting and finance. So, did you do anything with grants, for example? How were your sessions with your bookkeeper? How were your sessions with your CPA? How did you make out at the end of the year? Did you feel prepared? Did you feel underprepared? Were you able to take a hefty salary? How did the profit shake out? How did the financial numbers look compared to what your budget and or your plan was? So you would have kind of finance and accounting as a top level, and then you're going to list out all the different, again, projects and core activities. And what I'm looking for are what are some of the big projects that you tackled this year in the different subjects. So if we jumped over to curriculum, did you change the curriculum? Did you pivot over to Montessori or STEAM, for example? Did you roll out some additional programs on the curriculum side? Did you start utilizing artificial intelligence to deliver even one-to-one curriculum? What were some of the projects there? On the marketing side, did you launch a new website, try some new activities, hire an agency like ours? What were the different core activities? Now, the reason that I want to have you list out some of the other miscellaneous things is, yes, I'm very concerned about the big projects, the undertakings, because what we're going to do is debrief them. But I'm also looking for you to start to identify as you get into these areas, what are some things that are missing? And those things that you're going to start to find that are missing often are going to come from the miscellaneous stuff, and they're going to come from some of the projects that you started on. So let's jump back over to accounting and finance. So let's say that you did some reclassification and you wanted to make sure that you had your COGS or cost of goods, having that, or cost of services, having that kind of dialed in so where the number was flawless so that you could effectively manage kind of month over month. And then let's say that you also then dialed in your operating expenses so that you could really better manage the business. So great, now you're looking at COGS numbers, you're looking at operating expense numbers, and you started to do that on a monthly basis. But one of the things then you might point out or realize is, while we did that, we only had 3 meetings with our bookkeeper and 1 meeting with our CPA, and that was in the middle of December, right before the year closed. You might list out things like, while we got a better handle of these numbers, I still don't fully understand what they mean. I don't fully understand how knowing this is going to help me pivot over to here, just as a simple example. So you're going to go through these, and I want you to kind of internally have this master list that is topical. So all things accounting and finance, all things curriculum, all things team and staffing, all things marketing. The operation bucket can kind of be one of those like where everything can roll into, but a lot of centers like to separate that out. So operations might be maintenance, for example. Under the team and people, you could add some of the human resource stuff and payroll. And as you start to list out again the activities and the projects, what you're going to do is very similar in nature to the 360 marketing audit. Is you're going to do an audit of the projects that you've executed this year, and then some of the other topics that you've listed in those categories. So let's jump over to team. So we talked a little bit about kind of finance and accounting, but let's jump over to team. So maybe you had a project this year around culture and team member happiness. So what I want you to do is to write that out on a separate sheet of paper, and you're going to essentially do a SWOT analysis and a debrief of how that project went. So what worked well and what is working well? Well, great. Team member happiness is at an 8.7. It was at a 7.1 initially. The team members can actually rattle off the core values, and I'm starting to feel more buy-in. Great. What didn't work well? You're having a hard time with some of the new people buying into the culture. You are having to invest a lot more money than you kind of plan to invest on the culture side. Are there any threats to that particular project on the culture side? So maybe some people might think that you're too culture-ish when some people just want a straight job, for example. The culture one is a little bit of a challenge from a weakness and threat standpoint, but you also then can look at opportunities. So maybe you could do more with culture. You could have more team building events. So what you're going to do then in all of those different areas, and we'll stick with team for a minute, is do this project debrief. And the way that I like to look at it is that SWOT analysis. Now you could do a full debrief and just again, what worked, what didn't work as an example. But what I continue to like to do are just simple SWOT analysis. And the reason that I'm so big on SWOT is even if you executed this project 2 months ago, there might be some other things that are going to come up that you didn't realize were large opportunities at the time. So my team is virtual, and if I were kind of going through and auditing our culture, I'd say we made some culture improvements. We've rolled out some happy hour things, but on the opportunity side, I believe that there are a couple of tools that we could look at using to basically simulate a live office environment virtually. And I wouldn't have thought about that until recently if I was kind of putting tunnel vision on and thinking about that particular project. On the team side, you might also then start to write down other notes. Now, even if you didn't have a particular project, I want you to just kind of list out anything and everything that starts to come to mind. What we're aiming to do here is to trigger ideas. So you might write ideas like relook at current compensation, build out a profit sharing plan, increase my compensation, change HR providers, look at offering dental insurance. So you're aiming to kind of have the ideas flowing. Now, the reason that I like to do all of this beforehand is because if you walk into annual planning and you have 2,000 ideas, it's going to be a bit challenging to start to get your leadership team buy-in. Now, the strategy that we like to use for this exercise is for everyone to initially do this separately. And then what you'll do is after everyone's done, you're going to compile it onto Excel, Google Sheets, for example, so where you've got the topic. So like team, here are the project debriefs with the SWOT analysis. So how did the team think the culture project went? They might give you the complete opposite feedback and say it was an utter failure, and you're thinking, oh my God, we moved the needle so much. So you're looking to get a variety of different feedback, and I don't want their feedback until everyone has done it. Because what I found is that when we put together a shared document, they read what I wrote, and then they start to mimic it. I want their candid feedback, and then I want them to put other ideas. So what you end up having then are these topical tabs, and then on each of those tabs, you'll have the project debrief and then ideas. And the project debrief, I'm looking for, is there anything that needs to be cleaned up on the project? So some weaknesses from the project. Is there anything that then is a threat that could derail the project that we just moved the needle on? And then for me, I love looking for the opportunities. What other opportunities are there from that project that then can also be tied in with this project and that project? And when you've got your ideas, you've got the team ideas, this then becomes a lot more of an organized document. Now, the final piece to this is then having the team start to vote, and you want to do a blind vote. So if you look at team, and let's say there end up being 10 different potential projects for the next year. You kind of combine things, remove, add, etc. I want people to vote in order, like the top 1 through 5, a blind vote. And then you're going to have that list across all the other areas. So you've got it through accounting, you've got it on the team side, the finance side, overall operations, marketing, systems, technology, new equipment. So just having all those different things, the team, your leadership team in tandem with yourself then will have an organized list that you have a great starting point for your annual planning. So instead of walking into the annual plan and saying, how did all these cool projects work this year? What are your thoughts that we should look at doing next year? You take this as step 1 before you walk into any meetings. That is the step 1 of starting to execute annual planning, and it all starts with the prep. It starts with doing a 360 audit across all the aspects of your centers, really doing a deep dive at each project. What were the great things? What are the things that went well? What didn't go so well? What are some of the weaknesses? Are there some threats that could derail that project? And how can you continue to make it better as opportunities? You do that, you have your team do the same exercise, combine all the data, and now as we start to move through this process, you're walking in with this organized document of 15, 20 potential projects, all ranked in priority order. So you're not having to try and pull things out of people and have that awkward silence. You're literally already walking in with ideas. Stay tuned for part 2 next week as we continue to walk through strategic annual planning. Michael Tasner signing off. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I'll see you next week.